My coworker was prostituting during her shift. This happened years and years ago and another post reminded me of it. Myself and this coworker, who I'll call Amy, worked night audit. Amy worked 1 night a week so I could have a day off. I worked 6 nights a week at 10 hours a day. Overall, it was a sweet gig. I wasn't a manager, but I had access to everything in the building and camera permissions. My manager and the owner had camera access as well, but whenever something came up that we would need to pull footage, they would delegate it to me. Anyways, Amy has been working for nearly a year now. Things were great. She never called in and expressed how working 1 night a week at the hotel was super stress-free for her. Well, one day I get a call from Amy. Something's come up and she can't go in, and if we could swap shifts. Absolutely. Everything's normal when I arrive and I go about my routine until the clock strikes midnight. Enter John Doe. I spy him walking up to the desk, so I pop out to greet him. He looks shocked upon seeing me. I thought Amy was working tonight. I guess since our night schedule hasn't changed in forever, even a regular may have noticed. Sorry sir, Amy had an emergency earlier and called in. Can I check you in? Sure. Check-in complete, and he goes on his way. 30 minutes later another man enters. James Doe. I pop out and greet him. Same thing. I thought Amy was working. No, sir. She had an emergency earlier and wasn't able to make it. Oh, can I cancel? Sure. Okay. As I begin cancelling, I ask James Doe if Amy's absence was the reason he didn't want to stay. It puts him on edge. Oh, well, she provides great customer service and without her here, there's no point being here. Okay sir. Cancellation complete and James Doe leaves. 1 time sure. Twice though. I still have James Doe's cancelled reservation up, so I back search the name. This dude has stayed nearly every week. Same day, checking in at about the same time for the last 8 months. I search John Doe, similar results. Curiously fully peaked and a gut-sinking feeling, I go over to the computer that handles the cameras. I go back to last week and watch Amy's shift. I watch and see Mr. John Doe arrive, check in, and go into his room. Meanwhile, I watch Amy get out the back in 5 minute sign, place another piece of paper over it, and go into Mr. John Doe's room. I'm asking myself what was going on and forward the cameras. She's in there for nearly 15 minutes before she reappears in the hallway looking slightly disheveled. Worried, I watch her return to the desk, pull the sign back down, and I'm able to zoom in and see the sign. Please call Amy's phone number for service. What the? Mr. James Doe arrives. Same thing. He goes to the room and Amy shortly follows. 15 minutes later she returns to the desk. This continues for several more men during the night. I watched other guests come to the desk, see the sign, get confused but call the number. I watched Amy dash out of guest rooms and back to the desk to assist them, but go back to the room she had ran out of. I go back another week, and another, and another. It's the same routine. I decided I've seen enough and copy some of the footage and email it to the owner and my manager. I'm super concerned, but I know I've stumbled onto something that was way above me. I then call my manager, tell her I'm sorry for calling at such a forsaken hour, but she needs to look at what I've sent her. She says she will and hangs up. 10 minutes later she texts me telling me to not breathe a word and go about as normal. It's being handled. So I go about as normal. A few weeks later I get a call from my manager asking me if I could please cover Amy's shift for the foreseeable future. I say, sure, but can I be told why? What's happened? Amy was fired. Due to the possible legalities that could come out of this, she could not be allowed on shift any longer. She had been called in and confronted. She came clean and confessed that she had, indeed, been prostituting herself out. She actually had a system down with her clients. They had appointments. She had been making a killing and she had been doing this for the last 10 months. The owner and Amy came to the agreement that she wouldn't contact them for a referral. No cops, no legalities. She left quietly. She even contacted her clients and told them she no longer worked at the hotel. She wasn't a bad person at all. Never had a bad review or complaints regarding her, and her audits were always spotless. I was a little bummed to see her go, and it took forever to get another person hired to work so I could take days off. And to think, had she just cancelled the appointments for when she called off, she would have kept doing it too. That's what I don't understand. She had their info to tell them she was fired. So why couldn't she have contacted them when she switched shifts? I don't agree with her methods, but you'd think she'd want to keep that gravy train rolling. She probably couldn't get a hold of John and James, as those were the only two who came in and asked about Amy. That or her other clients were smart enough to not ask why she wasn't there. It was usually housekeeping I had a problem with. Never heard of it from night audit. It seems like all that time away from the desk would have caught up with her eventually. Oh, that's right, it did. Housekeeping was the reason we had installed cameras in the hallways to begin with. I gotta be honest, I'm impressed with her work ethic and ingenuity. Very impressed. She's working 2 jobs and no complaints. That takes some effort. I do get there are ramifications, but still, this is definitely a way to maximize your income. True, I get yelled at if I'm in the bathroom for a few minutes. 30 some odd years ago, before my time, according to stories I heard, someone was running an overnight prostitution ring in our offices in Midtown Manhattan. Couches and offices of some of the execs were used for privacy and to do the deeds. Anyway, Amy's fault for not telling her clients she was taking the night off. First rule of the prostitution club, or something. At my sister's wedding, the housekeepers stole all my stepdad's medicine and money he had left in his pants. He had thrown his pants on the couch because they were running late and he forgot to grab his wallet. They stole $600 and his prescription pain medication from his overnight bag. The hotel did nothing and told him he shouldn't have left stuff out. Honestly, the main thing I'm taking away from this is why the heck you work so much and aren't a manager? How does a person even keep pets or a personal life with those hours? That's literally insane. Holy crap. I knew of a housekeeping supervisor who'd service the guests in their rooms. IDK if she got $ for it, but she got busted when she didn't assign the correct room number to herself, so a poor unsuspecting housekeeper walked in on a very naked man. Which unfortunately isn't outside of the norm, but it was strange when he said, "Oh, you're not insert supervisor's name." I would love to hear the fallout of that. LOL, that sounds crazy. Daggone. Imagine if her clients had enough sense to not open their mouths about her. She'd still be turning tricks there. I doubt it. Something was bound to happen sooner or later. It's like, if you always take the same route to work every day, and every day you speed excessively, eventually you're going to get pulled over. At least with the way things went, she got off without cops and the hotel got off without legalities. She probably went to another hotel to turn tricks. IDK. It's kind of interesting that she'd dash out in the middle of prostituting herself to tend to guests instead of just wait and make an excuse. LMAO. I'm guessing she did it to avoid a guest complaining. Waiting a few minutes versus the full 15 minutes is definitely worth complaining about. A health inspector is touring a hospital for the first time, and the chief of medicine is escorting him on rounds. They pass a patient's room whose door is open, and the inspector sees the patient sitting up in bed, furiously masturbating. "What in the heck is going on here?" exclaims the inspector. "Sorry, sir, but you don't understand," the chief of medicine replies. "That patient has a rare medical condition. If he doesn't have at least 3 orgasms per day, he could die." Well, I suppose that's understandable, but at least have him close the door. "Will do," the chief assures the inspector. A few minutes later, they pass another open room, and this time the inspector sees a nurse performing oral sex on a patient. "Now, this is just outrageous," screams the inspector. "What kind of hospital is this? I am going to have you shut down." "Sir, please, let me explain," the chief says. "This patient has the same condition as the other one we saw, but you have a nurse performing sexual favors. Well, you see, so that patient has better insurance." I worked at one of those roadside motel places and I've had so many guests call and ask where the H are, or where are the girls? Gee, go ask the cops sitting in the parking lot. We had multiple stings. Girls would post pictures of our rooms as their place and it was way too obvious. Cops would just sit back and arrest the guys as they left. I had to live in extended stays for a year and OMG, the amount of on-site staff that had an extra business running was impressive. Didn't matter what the rate was, there was always at least one. I get why townies get a bad name, but when you see staff running hourly rates, you stop feeling bad about spending your paycheck to get away from an abuser. I always wondered how they got away with it. I'm curious to hear some examples. I wonder if she wanted to be caught, like had a problem client and this was an easy way to get out if it. Probably gets a job like it at a new hotel with a new phone number and calls back the clients who weren't problematic. Yeah, the two that had the guts to ask about her are definitely suspect. This is one of many reasons to just legalize it, but of course if it was legal the folks who swear it should be illegal would have a lot more problems finding underage victims. There are enormous numbers of women, and some men and boys, I'm sure, who have been trafficked and are being forced to prostitute themselves out, and full legalization probably wouldn't do much for those people. If anything, it might make it easier for them to operate. Considering both the trafficking and the Amy's of the world, I do think prostitution should be legal, but it would definitely need stricter regulation than, say, realtors or wedding planners and other largely unregulated businesses. Legalizing prostitution would allow people who are being trafficked to get police support without being mistaken for willing prostitutes and arrested. A really common tactic used on trafficking victims is to tell them it's useless to try and alert the authorities since they'll just get themselves arrested. Legalizing prostitution completely gets rid of that threat to victims, so it's easier for them to get legal support to escape their situation. In addition, it would allow prostitutes who are assaulted while working to report those crimes to the police as well, bringing dangerous predators who don't care about whether the person they're paying is doing that job voluntarily or not to the attention of police. With good regulation that keeps voluntary workers safe and healthy, it would be a lot more difficult for traffickers to pretend their victims aren't being exploited. Also, the fixation in the US on sex trafficking blinds us to lots of other human trafficking victims who are forced into other types of work, and there are a lot of other industries that involve human trafficking besides just sex work. Exactly, it needs to be regulated to help keep people safe, but you can only regulate a legal profession. So anywhere that prostitution is illegal, it isn't regulated, and abuse runs rampant. Think about one of the main ways that pimps groom women into prostitution and keep them controlled: drugs. Imagine you have to get tested for drugs every 3 months, and if you test positive for drugs you have to get addiction treatment, which just happens to be designed to separate prostitutes from pimps for a month. It is easy to make an underage runaway sell their body, but it will be a lot harder if you can no longer hide your victims in the large pool of adult prostitutes, the ones who get regular checkups and have a license they needed for. Immigrant wants a prostitution license? Okay, we need to interview her, alone, we being a social worker, a translator, if needed, and a police officer. Just think about how much business she brought into the hotel. Wonder how much the monthly revenue dropped after she was fired. Indeed, especially since it appears each customer rented out their own room and she had several customers every night she was on shift. OP, were you tempted to confront her and get a percentage of the profit? No, lol, I was more worried on the what ifs for the other guests. If the sex was consensual, her clients paid for the hotel room, and she kept up with all of her receptionist responsibilities, I don't see why anyone should care. Way to be a narc. Because it wasn't the right way to go about it. She was on shift and was supposed to be at the desk versus in rooms screwing guests. The hottest chick I went to high school with is a H. She has been a H since just after high school, about 16 years or so. She looks freaking rough, meow. I can't even imagine what her clown hole is like, meow. One of the other high schools I went to also had a girl who ended up being a high-end call girl in Vegas. She ended up on billboards and making like $10K a night and then got out on top. The first one I told you about was a Craigslist H. Come to think of it, I have known a lot of H. Meow. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.